Imagine you are standing on a dusty mountain ridge above the Dead Sea. The air tastes like minerals and heat. The water below you is still and shining, and the ground crunches under your feet because it is loaded with salt. You look up, and right in front of you stands a tall, narrow column of pale rock, shaped eerily like a hooded figure staring out over the valley. Local guides point and say, "That is Lot's wife." Now, here is where it gets wild. In the last few years, videos have exploded online, claiming that archaeologists have finally found physical proof for the biblical story of Sodom and Gomorrah. People are saying things like, "They found the pillar of salt that used to be Lot's wife," or "They discovered sulfur balls and burned cities that match the Bible exactly." Some even insist that scientists cracked open a salt pillar, tested it, and found traces of organic material inside, like the remains of a human body. So today, let's slow down that story. What really happened in the Bible? What have archaeologists actually found in the lands around the Dead Sea? And is there any real scientific basis for saying they proved Sodom and Gomorrah? Or are we watching faith, legend, geology, and clickbait all swirling together? As we walk through this, keep one question in your mind. If they really did find something that lines up with Sodom and Gomorrah, would it change your faith, your life, or the way you look at your own past? And by the way, if you enjoy deep dives that connect scripture, history, and real places on Earth, remember to subscribe to TrueLight and tap the notification bell so you do not miss the next episodes. Let us begin with the story itself. In the book of Genesis, we meet a man named Lot. He is the nephew of Abraham, and he has chosen to live in a prosperous but spiritually dark city called Sodom. The valley around it is described as lush and well-watered, like the garden of the Lord. It is a place where crops grow, animals feed, and trade flourishes. But beneath that outward prosperity is a culture that has become violent, corrupt, and cruel. Scripture tells us that the outcry against Sodom and its neighboring city Gomorrah reaches heaven. The language gives the sense of victims crying out for justice, of people being oppressed, exploited, and abused. God announces that he will investigate, and if the situation is as evil as the cries suggest, judgment will come. 2 angels arrive at Sodom, disguised as travelers. Lot sees them and insists they stay at his house, because he knows how dangerous the city can be at night. As the evening darkens, the men of the city surround his home and demand that Lot hand over the visitors so they can abuse them. It is a terrifying picture of a community that has normalized violence and humiliation as entertainment. The angels intervene. They strike the crowd with blindness and pull Lot back inside. Then they reveal who they are and what is about to happen. They tell Lot, "Get your family, get out of the city now. Do not look back, do not stop, run for the hills." This is already a mercy story. In the middle of judgment, there is a warning, a way of escape, a narrow open door. Lot hesitates. His sons-in-law think he is joking. The angels almost have to drag him, his wife and his daughters out of the city. They repeat one simple command: do not look back. As dawn breaks, the sky above the plain erupts. The text describes burning sulfur, or fire and brimstone raining down from heaven. Cities go up in flames, buildings collapse. Smoke rises in massive columns like the smoke of a furnace. The land that was once a garden becomes scorched earth. And then there is that one short haunting verse. Lot's wife, running away from the catastrophe, looks back. She turns and stares toward the city she is leaving behind. And in that moment, she becomes, in the words of Scripture, a pillar of salt. She is frozen between what God is judging and the future God is opening. She becomes a monument to the danger of clinging to a past that God is calling you out of. That is the story. Now fast forward thousands of years. You are back on that ridge above the Dead Sea. You are looking at this tall salt pillar on the side of Mount Sodom in modern Israel, or at a similar one on the Jordanian side. Guides tell you it has been known for centuries as Lot's wife. Jewish historian Josephus, writing in the 1st century, claimed he had seen such a pillar. Later Christian writers said the same. Even medieval pilgrims talked about a salt statue near the Dead Sea, said to be Lot's wife. So, is this new? Not really. The idea that a salt pillar near the Dead Sea is Lot's wife has been around for at least almost 2,000 years. Modern geologists have studied Mount Sodom and found that the mountain itself is mostly halite, which is basically rock salt, rising and deforming over time. The pillar known as Lot's wife is a natural formation created by erosion, gravity, and the slow movement of salt in the mountain. That does not mean the story is false. It actually shows us something really important about how stories and landscapes interact. Scholars talk about the story of Lot's wife as having an etiological function. That is a fancy way of saying people saw a strange pillar of salt near the Dead Sea and asked, "What is that doing there?" The story answers, "Let me tell you about a woman who looked back when God told her not to." The land becomes a sermon. The rock becomes a warning sign. Now, here is where the modern claims start to spice things up. You will see videos with titles like "Scientific Proof that Sodom and Gomorrah were real," or "Archaeologists find Lot's wife and test the pillar of salt." They will show images of a human-shaped salt column, talk about bioorganic material inside, and say, "This proves the Bible right." Let us be honest. That makes for an incredible thumbnail and a powerful emotional hit. But what does actual research say so far? Researchers who study Mount Sodom have indeed examined salt pillars and caves in that region. One scientific study looked at how a particular salt pillar and its adjoining cave formed and even tried to estimate how quickly the pillar is rising as the salt flows and erodes. The focus in that work was on geology and dating, not on human remains. Right now, there is no widely accepted peer-reviewed study that confirms a specific pillar of salt around the Dead Sea contains the remains of a human body that once was Lot's wife. If that kind of discovery were confirmed in a solid scientific journal, it would be major global news, not just a passing claim in a viral video. Does that mean every story you hear is fake? Not necessarily. It means we have to separate 3 different layers. There is the biblical story that believers hold as sacred. There is the landscape of the Dead Sea, full of dramatic salt formations that look like they were made for this story. And there is a wave of modern content that sometimes blurs good science with speculation and marketing. But the pillar of salt is only one piece of the puzzle. What about the cities themselves? If Sodom and Gomorrah were real places, where were they? Could archaeologists ever find the ruins of those cities? For a long time, many scholars thought Sodom must have been in the southern part of the Dead Sea region, near places called Bab Edra and Numera. Excavations there uncovered ancient cities and huge cemeteries that were destroyed and abandoned sometime in the Bronze Age. Some researchers argued that the burned layers, strange deposits, and location matched the biblical plain of the Jordan. Others were more cautious, pointing out that we still do not have an inscription saying, "Welcome to Sodom," on a city gate. More recently, another candidate stepped into the spotlight, a large site in Jordan called Tal el-Hammam. This city sits northeast of the Dead Sea and was once a major power in the region. Archaeologists excavating there found evidence of a catastrophic destruction. Walls were leveled, buildings collapsed, debris included pottery that seemed melted at very high temperatures. The destruction layer looked sudden and intense. In the year that we call 2021, a group of researchers published an article in a major scientific journal, arguing that Tal el-Hammam had been destroyed by a massive airburst, something like the famous Tunguska event in Siberia. They suggested that a fragment of a comet or asteroid exploded over the city, sending a fiery shockwave that flattened buildings and burned everything in sight. The authors and some commentators connected this to the biblical description of fire and sulfur raining from heaven, and even suggested that Tal el-Hammam might be the historical core behind the story of Sodom. You can imagine how that played online. Headlines started appearing saying, "Scientists proved Sodom was wiped out by a meteor." Videos claimed, "Science confirms Sodom," and many people shared them as if the case were closed. But science is not a one-way announcement. It is a conversation, and in this case, the conversation has been intense. Other geologists, impact specialists, and archaeologists began to critique the paper. They questioned whether the supposed evidence really pointed to a cosmic explosion, whether the data was strong enough, and whether the images used in the article had been properly handled. Over time, more and more concerns were raised. Eventually, the journal attached a cautionary note to the paper, saying they were investigating. After further review, they decided to retract the article. In the middle of the decade we are now living in, that airburst study was officially withdrawn due to problems with its methods and with how the data was interpreted. So, where does that leave us? Tal el-Hammam is still a real ancient city. It really was destroyed violently in the Middle Bronze Age. That destruction is still fascinating and worth studying. But the claim that it has been scientifically proven to be Sodom destroyed by a meteor is, at this point, not accepted by the broader scientific community. In other words, the debate is ongoing, and anyone saying this is settled fact is going beyond what the evidence currently supports. Now, this is where some of you might feel tension. On one side, you have people who say, "We do not need archaeology. We just believe the Bible. End of story." On the other side, you have people who say, if science cannot prove every detail, then it is all myth. But there is another way to look at this. Think of the Dead Sea region itself. This is one of the lowest places on the planet. A deep basin with no outlet. Rivers flow in, but the water leaves only by evaporation. As it evaporates, it leaves behind layer upon layer of salt and other minerals. That is why the Dead Sea is so dense and salty that you can float effortlessly on its surface, and why the surrounding cliffs and hills are streaked with white. Mount Sodom, on the southwestern shore, is essentially a massive salt body. Over time, tectonic forces pushed the salt upward. Rain, wind, and the heat of the desert carved it into ridges, caves, and pillars. One of those pillars looks uncannily like a cloaked figure. People saw it, told stories about it, and passed those stories down. Generations later, scriptures, traditions, and pilgrims attached spiritual meaning to that stone witness. Meanwhile, the region sits on a major geological fault line. Earthquakes have shaken this area throughout history. Shifts in the ground can release pockets of gas, cause landslides, and destabilize settlements. There have been real cities, real disasters, real fires, and real suffering in this landscape. Put all of that together and you can see how a catastrophic event in this area, combined with its supernatural-looking environment, could easily become the seed of a powerful story about judgment, mercy, and the dangers of looking back. From a faith perspective, that does not have to weaken the story. It can actually deepen it. Maybe God's judgment in Genesis works through natural processes, through shifting ground, flammable materials, gas and fire. Maybe the biblical writers describe that event using the language, imagery, and understanding they had at the time. The theological message is about a God who takes injustice seriously, who listens to the cries of victims, and who offers a way of escape if people are willing to leave the place of corruption behind. From a skeptical or academic perspective, someone might say, the story is a rich parable, built on real geography and possibly real disasters, but heavily theologized. They might see Lot's wife as a symbolic figure, standing in for all of us who are tempted to turn back toward what is destroying us. And here is the fascinating thing. Both perspectives pay close attention to the land, the salt, the ruins, the pillars, the smoke, and the fossils of ancient cities. They simply interpret the connection between those things and God differently. So, what do we do with those dramatic claims about sulfur balls and burned cities? Some explorers and tour providers take visitors to locations around the Dead Sea and show them small round nodules that they describe as pure sulfur, embedded in ashy ground. They say, look, this proves that burning sulfur fell from the sky just like Genesis says. Videos of these demonstrations rack up views as people watch these nodules ignite and burn with a blue flame. Geologists do acknowledge that sulfur can occur naturally, especially in areas with evaporate deposits and past volcanic or hydrothermal activity. But they also caution that some of what gets presented as miracle sulfur might be misunderstood or oversimplified. Without detailed chemical analysis and careful study, it is hard to leap from this is sulfur found in the ground to this is direct physical evidence of a specific biblical event. Again, the issue is not that the land is boring. The land is wild. The issue is that human beings, especially in the age of social media, are really good at taking a bit of data and spinning it into a dramatic story, either to prove a point or to get clicks. There is a word that keeps coming up, and it is worth sitting with for a moment. Proof. A lot of people are searching for proof. Proof that God is real. Proof that Scripture can be trusted. Proof that they are not crazy for believing in miracles. So when a photo appears of a salt pillar shaped like a woman, or a paper suggests a cosmic blast over an ancient city, it taps into a deep longing. It feels like the universe whispering, "See, you were right." But let us remember something simple and uncomfortable. Even in the Bible, when people saw miracles with their own eyes, not everyone believed. Egyptians watched the plagues unfold and still hardened their hearts. People saw Jesus heal the sick and still plotted to kill him. Proof in the sense of overwhelming evidence that forces everyone to agree is not really how faith works. On the other hand, dismissing everything as legend and superstition can be just as lazy. The Dead Sea region is not a fairy tale. It is a real place you can visit, stand in, and taste. Its geography is so intense that it has shaped stories for thousands of years. The idea that ancient people experienced catastrophic events there and tried to make theological sense of them is deeply plausible. So maybe the right move is not to say, science has fully proved Sodom, or science has finally disproved Sodom, but to say, The land and the stories are in conversation. Here is a deeper question. Why do we care so much that Lot's wife turned into a pillar of salt? Think about what that image really communicates. A person who cannot let go of what God is pulling them away from. A person who, in a moment of crisis, turns their eyes back towards the place of comfort, compromise and sin. Instead of moving forward, they freeze. Instead of becoming a living witness to God's rescue, they become a monument to hesitation. That is why, centuries later, Jesus says to his followers, "Remember Lot's wife." It is a call to spiritual focus, a warning that you cannot keep your heart anchored in a place God is judging, and still walk into the future He has for you. So, let us bring this down to ground level. You might never hike Mount Sodom, or stand in the shadow of the salt pillar locals call Lot's wife. But you do have your own cities, places, habits, relationships, and patterns of thinking that God may be calling you out of. Maybe for you, it is a relationship that pulls you away from who you are called to be. Maybe it is a secret habit that numbs your pain, but poisons your soul. Maybe it is a version of yourself defined by bitterness, pride, or shame. Sometimes God's call sounds like those angels in the story. Urgent, clear, and almost desperate. Get up, get out, do not stay here, do not look back. And like Lot, we hesitate. Like his wife, we want one more look. The question is not only, did archaeologists prove Lot's wife existed? The question is, am I becoming like her? Am I frozen between my past and my future? Am I so attached to what is burning that I cannot step fully into what God is offering? If this is resonating with you, take a moment after this video to sit quietly and ask, where am I looking back? And if you are willing, share a version of that in the comments. You do not need to overshare or give personal details. You could simply write, "I am done looking back," as a way of marking your decision. And if you want more content that takes stories like this and explores both the spiritual meaning and the historical background, make sure you like this video and subscribe to TrueLight. It helps this content reach more people who are asking the same questions you are. Before we finish, let us circle back to that image on the hillside. You are standing near the Dead Sea, the lowest place on Earth's surface. The air is thick and still. The water in front of you glows beyond anything your camera can really capture. Behind you rises Mount Sodom, built of salt and time and pressure. On its flank, that tall pillar leans out over the valley. Some see only a geological oddity, carved by wind and the slow melting of salt. Others see a silent sermon about obedience, trust, and the cost of divided loyalty. Whether you take it as literal proof, symbolic reminder, or some mysterious blend of both, the challenge remains the same. When God says, "Run, do not look back," where will your eyes be? If you found this exploration helpful, consider sharing this video with someone who loves both scripture and science, both faith and facts. Invite them into the conversation and stay connected with TrueLight, because there are many more ancient stories, mysterious places, and hard questions waiting on the horizon, and we are just getting started.